What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the Across the Cowboys podcast. I am your host, Paul Ryan, and with me are the greatest co-hosts in the world, Mike the Pig Crump and Brendan Fergie Smith. Guys, how are you?
Doing good, man.
Doing great.
Mike, where can we find you on Twitter, sir?
At CD Piglet, nice and easy.
Brendan, how about you?
At Brendan_Smith26.
Yes, I'm Paul Ryan. You can find me on Twitter at Paul_Ryan15. Well, after a few weeks off, it feels good to be back, and what better time to bring back our fan favorite series, Cowboys Beef, for its 5th season. Joining us tonight is sports producer for Iheartmedia and co-host of the Fantatics show. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Shane Carter to the show. Shane, how are you?
I'm good. I'm doing real good. Thanks for having me on the show, y'all. I know y'all have been following me on socials. By the way, y'all can find me not just on Twitter, but on all social accounts at Shane Carter TX. If you care about my opinions, if you care about how I look, which you probably don't, otherwise you wouldn't be listening to a podcast. But you can find all the content that I drop there as well. As Paul mentioned, I'm a sports producer for iHeart in San Antonio, Texas, and co-host of the Fantatics, 10 a.m. to noon Central Time. You can hear it on Ticket 760 in Central Texas, or if you missed the show, you can listen to it on the iHeartRadio app, which is free, and that was a company plug.
Yes, sir.
That's a radio man right there.
And Shane, one more time, where can we find you on Twitter, sir?
At Shane Carter TX. I used to put my Twitter handle down here at the bottom, then I realized the $ is an S, so I started doing that instead.
Hey, I like it, man. I like it. Let's go ahead and get after it, sir. Shane, I'm curious. How did you become a Cowboys fan?
Unfortunately, I was born into it. My dad really got me into football at a super young age. I would sit on his lap and watch Cowboys games really before I even knew what was going on. And because he was also a coach for a long time, I learned the game at a young age as well. Like I learned a lot of the intricacies, the ins and outs of game planning, of how everything works. It's not just simple. Some people are what you would call not scoreboard readers, but people who just watch the box score, and they see like, oh, this guy's good, this guy's bad, but they don't see is the ins and outs in between the play, what's going on, if they actually did their job. Why did this happen? Did he not do his job properly on a player-to-player basis? So it feels kind of braggedy, call it knowledge of the game, but my experience with the game started at a young age, and it kind of transcended over time. And then I realized I should just do this for a living, and that's kind of how it came about.
Very cool.
So if you had one job with Dallas that's not the GM, what would it be?
Okay, so if I had one job with the Cowboys and win the GM, I would be the PR director, just so I could control some of the stories that go out, because it feels like a lot of the stories that go out and about feel unnecessary and add fodder and fuel to the fire, so to speak, amongst other fan bases, because it feels like more fan bases hate the Cowboys not because they're good or bad, but just because we get talked about a bunch. So if we really want to change culture with Brian Schottenheimer as the PR director, I would do a much better job of seeing what stories go in, what stories go out, responding to things that happen in real life at a better time, and also just trying to make sure that I get as few mics away from Jerry as possible.
As we go, all the bad Dak narratives would be gone. But what is your biggest what if for the Cowboys?
Oh my God, I have so many what ifs. I got so many what ifs. Okay, so one what if I have is if you go back to the 2007 game with lost to the Giants, what if Patrick Creighton doesn't let up on the route? We obviously have the one back in 2016. What if Aaron Rodgers doesn't make that long completion down the sidelines, the toe drag? I'm different. I don't have the what if when it comes to the Dez caught it play. Here's why. Our defense was crap that year, and we still had 7.5 minutes left on the clock. So it's hard for me to believe, even if that touchdown had stood, we were going to be able to stop them from scoring anyway. So that what if hurt because it was an obviously a touchdown, but it's not as bad as ones that happened at the end of the game that literally cost us the game. And I feel like those two are probably my biggest what ifs. Is probably the Patrick Creighton let up pass, which I had to play after that interception back of the end zone. And this is my producer to my right, who was trying to chime in. And probably toe drag swag against the Packers, and really a team with the Cowboys that probably could have made it at the very least to the Super Bowl, because I think they could have beat that Falcons team that made it to Houston that year. I do.
You know what your producer's trying to tell you? Forget the toe drag swag. When Jeff Heath hit Aaron Rodgers,
Oh, that's a good one.
On to the ball. If
That's
he
a good
fumbles
one.
and we pick it up, it's game over.
I also go back, and this is sort of like a longevity type of what if, right? And I don't know how old any of y'all are, but I'm assuming at least one of y'all is old enough to remember Michael Irvin playing. And the what if I have for that one is whenever he got concussed against Philly, how much longer do we think he could have played? How much longer could Troy have played? Emmett obviously was on borrowed time. He was a running back who retired after 14 seasons, so that was just inevitable. But I do wonder, had Irvin not retired, would that have also delayed Aikman's retirement a little bit? Would we have had like one more shot at least a conference championship? Because remember that year in '99, that the team that won that year was the Rams, the greatest show on turf. The NFC at that time was not what it is now, where it's a lot better. The AFC for a while actually ran the NFL, so I feel like the Cowboys probably could have had at least one more shot at that.
Yep, I agree.
Those are some really good
Injuries to those two really push them back.
When you think of the Cowboys, who was the first player that comes to mind?
I mean, my lifelong favorite Cowboy of all time is Emmitt Smith. That was my first favorite Cowboy was Emmitt Smith. He retired. He retired in 04, 05, something like that. So I was like in middle school, almost into high school around that time. So, but I had grown up with Emmitt Smith from a young age. He was the first true star player that like really brought me into football in the way that MJ brought me into basketball. And so not only was he a Cowboy player, but he was a Cowboys player that I saw every single week, one that I just like knew something special was going to happen when he had the ball. And even though people talk about Barry being the greater player, to be fair, Barry Sanders might be a better player. I don't think it necessarily makes him a greater player. When people talk about greatness is achieved. Better is measured based on skill. So that's where the argument for me stops there.
It scares me that we might be the same age. That terrifies me. You look so much younger. Okay, I'm not even going to get into that rant. Assuming go ahead, please, Shane, please.
I was going to say I'll be 49 this December. So I mean, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh.
I just want to be. I was just.
I would have just dropped dead. I would have died.
I'm closer to 49. I'm closer to 49 than I am 5. If that makes you, if that does anything for you.
I'm not going to do this. Mount Rushmore. I'm assuming Emmett's on it. Give me your other 3 for your Cowboys Mount Rushmore.
See, this was tough for me because I had to think about eras. I had to think about stuff that I watched because whenever you do a Mount Rushmore, greatest of all time, if you discount players you never saw but understand their greatness, you're discounting the sport and your franchise as a whole. So a lot of times people talk about like who's the greatest basketball player of all time. It's usually down between LeBron, Jordan, and Kobe, and it goes back and forth with that, right? But people always seem to forget about guys like Magic or Dr. J. They're in the conversation, even if they're not in that conversation. So when it came down to the Cowboys, I had to look at who I thought was just like purely the most important to the franchise in that time. So yes, Emmett's in there because I don't think you can have the all-time leading rusher, a record that's probably never going to be broken, by the way, on there. I would also have Tom Landry on there just because his silhouette is still one of the most famous in the NFL for that one. Mm-hmm. I have Roger in there. Just because the Cowboys, when they start off as a franchise, they were very bad to start off with. But then Roger came along after he was done with the Naval Academy, and he took them to being a contender pretty much right away. And he had that same longevity for, I think he played for 13 or 14 seasons. I'm not 100% sure on the exact number. So he's on there. Now the fourth one, I feel like people are gonna fight me on a little bit. I thought about Irvin. I didn't put him on there, because I thought Irvin was definitely the leader of those teams. But I also feel like receivers a lot of times are beneficiaries of really good quarterbacks. Obviously, sometimes they make the quarterback look better. I think when it came down to him and Aikman, I feel like they kind of cancel each other out, if I was being honest. So I didn't have Aikman on there, and I didn't have Michael Irvin on there. Who I put actually as the fourth greatest Cowboy of all time was the guy who they call Mr. Cowboy, and that's Bob Lilly. And Bob Lilly, again, his position nowadays, as opposed to 50, 60 years ago when he played, is vastly different. but it was still like he was part of the beginning of what became what they call America's team. The America's team moniker really took over because obviously Roger Staubach came from the Naval Academy, and that really gave the aspect, oh, he's the captain. He runs all this. But in the same way that Michael Irvin was the true captain of those 90s Cowboys teams, the true captain of those 60s Cowboys teams, and Staubach, as mentioned, was Bob Lilly. And so I don't think that you could have the franchise to be where it's at now without him. So out of respect for that, I had Bob Lilly in my Mount Rushmore.
Every name you mentioned, including Aikman, Irvin, add Jimmy, and
Jimmy.
And Randy White. And I think if you pick any of them,
I thought Zach Martin too. Good. I thought Zach Martin.
Zach and Larry both fair. Larry can go up there too. He didn't really win enough, but neither did Zach. You know. And
that's why I also went with Bob Lilly, also just because like he's not near as good an offensive lineman as Larry Allen or Zach Martin were. But I think he did more to the Cowboys and of longevity of their overall franchise greatness just because of what he did. Larry Allen, you could argue, is the greatest offensive lineman of all time, regardless of position. But just in terms of like importance to the Cowboys, I feel like Bob Lilly is probably more important to their history. And I'm trying not to be disrespectful because I love Larry Allen, and rest in peace.
No, I agree with you.
I wish my Bob Lilly jersey was in the background. Of course, I only have Tony Dorsett there instead. But
Tony Dorsett would have been a good one too.
Yeah, he's just chilling there in the background on the hallway. But so we're talking about all these Cowboy greats. Who is the most overrated Cowboy of all time?
Overrated Cowboy. See, that's tough. Just because if you know they're a true great, then they ain't overrated, right? Like so, Troy Aikman, a lot of people thought was overrated just simply because he was a quarterback of a team that really didn't need him to be a great quarterback. But the thing is that, and we've seen this with average teams, you still have to have a quarterback play at least average. You know, we saw Brad Johnson win a Super Bowl. We saw Joe Flacco win a Super Bowl. In that one season, they were good enough. They were great to win their team a Super Bowl. And Aikman, even though he's definitely not where I would say Brett Favre or Steve Young were as a quarterback. He's definitely not where Joe Flacco and Brad Johnson were. I don't think he's the overrated guy we're thinking of. If I'm being honest, you know who I think is kind of overrated a little bit? Just a tiny, tiny bit. I feel like we kind of overrated Tony Romo a little bit. I think we look back on him with rose-colored glasses. Here's why. When we look at Tony Romo, we are impressed with him because he was an undrafted free agent who became a star quarterback for the most valuable franchise in the league. And a lot of people think that if it weren't for certain issues that came in the way of both on the team and in terms of the front office, maybe they could have gone further. But too often when it came down to game-winning drives or trying to tie the game up, how often were you not hold your breath that he was going to throw an interception? That was my thing with him, is that like as he would make great plays, and if you won the game big, a lot of times he put up big numbers. And he could blow teams out by 20 points. But in those crunch time games, you didn't always trust that he was going to pull through. You always hoped he would, but you don't have the same confidence. With someone like Dak Prescott, I have more confidence than I did with Tony in those late game drives that he's going to take it down the field and we're going to tie the game up or we're going to win it than I did with Tony. So Tony, I think we look back on with rose-colored glasses, respectively. Obviously, his career came to an end in a sucky way. But I do think that it's just because time has passed, we look back on it differently. I think we kind of overrate him just a tiny bit.
Interesting, man. That's a good answer. Tony Romo being your most overrated Cowboys player. Who's the most underrated Cowboys player in your eyes?
Underrated is tough, too, because a lot of those Cowboys are what-ifs. You know, what if this guy never got hurt? Sean Lee was always a big what-if for me because he and DeMar been overshown. I feel like I'm the same wavelength of really talented, all-pro level linebackers that are always facing injuries. So Sean Lee's definitely up there. I also think – God, it's tough to think. You know, I think Nate Newton's kind of underrated just because he played across from Larry Allen, and it's easy to get overshadowed playing across from a legend, even though he himself was a Pro Bowl level guard. A lot of people consider that Nate Newton and Larry Allen could be one of the greatest guard combos of all time, but people often forget that Nate Newton even existed. Like outside of the Cowboys spectrum, and again, Nate Newton, he covers the Cowboys, so we know who he is. People forget he exists sometimes. So just for that, I felt like I would say Nate.
Eric Williams next to you doesn't help either. Like,
right?
The guy that Reggie White legitimately said he feared playing, that hurts your being next to him.
Right.
Underrates Nate Newton too. That's a great answer.
Well, the 90s O-line was so good, you don't really think about the actual person there. You're like, oh, that entire line was dominant. So you don't really think, oh, Nate Newton, Eric Williams. You're like, oh, yeah. It's like, oh, that's just the Cowboys O-line. Like that's what you chop it up to, not the actual people there.
Now we get the fun. Oh, producer's up. Now we get the fun question: is Dak Prescott overrated or underrated?
I think Dak Prescott is properly rated. If you're being honest, here's why I say that, and let me put my producer back down for a second. If you are someone who says he plays as a top 10 quarterback when he's out there, that is accurate because he consistently does play his top 10 quarterback. If you're someone who says he's an 11 to 20 quarterback, it's probably because that you probably just don't like the Cowboys and let that skew your vision. If you're someone who believes he's truly an elite quarterback, then I think you've muddled down what elite truly means. To me, there's only 4, maybe 3, depending on how you want to look at it, elite quarterbacks in the NFL: Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, and then Lamar, because those 4 guys earn the term elite. With Dak, if we want to be fair about his when he does well, we have to be fair when he hasn't done well. He doesn't have the postseason success. He looked bad in that playoff game against the Packers after the first half, but he also has brought his team back in a lot of big game deficits. So it's just because the nature of the position and the nature of the fame that comes with it that the quarterback is going to be put under a much bigger microscope than another team. If you took Dak's success, regular season success, and what he does in the playoffs, and you put him on a lesser franchise, you put him on the Jags, he is a perennial MVP candidate. He probably already wins one. Because he plays for the Cowboys, he's going to be looked at through a different lens and therefore isn't fairly judged. So I think Dak Prescott, if you are being someone who's completely fair about who he is as a 7 to 12 type of quarterback, right, in this day and age, in 2025, that I believe is where he's fairly rated. He's not top 5 anymore, and that's fine because you can't really trust that he'll stay healthy enough for 17 games because he's shown that in the last 4 years. But he also has shown that when he plays, he's still one of the better quarterbacks in the league. So if you are fairly judging him, then I say he is properly rated where people have him.
Do you believe more people have him above the 7 to 12 or below the 7 to 12?
Below. They have him. More people have him below. More people are going to say those 4 guys I mentioned. They're going to say Justin Herbert, who hadn't done a lick of damn. They're going to have Jalen Hurts, who I believe is the beneficiary of a great team. Even though I do believe he as a quarterback is still good, I do believe he also benefits. I think there's quarterbacks like Matt Stafford, who I think are starting to get more respect than he did in Detroit. If you have the same success in LA that as he did in Detroit, he's probably more regarded as he is now. But more people are going to say Dak Prescott is a second half quarterback than a first half quarterback amongst the top starters.
So you're saying he's underrated then?
Yes.
There we go. I was determined to get the answer.
Yeah. If we're being honest, yeah.
Inside thing, Shane, that we will tell you immediately afterwards before you go.
Yeah.
Dude, I saw the wheels turning.
Yeah, I agree. Sure. I agree.
Well, you already kind of touched on it, but coming back from another injury, major injury, how do you feel about Dak Prescott being the long-term quarterback?
Well, it depends on what you mean by long-term. If by long-term you mean this year or the next 4 years, I don't think I can rely on him for the next 4 years. Here's a couple reasons why. Once you hit a certain age in life, it doesn't matter if you're playing sports or not, those injuries take longer to fully heal, to develop yourself. He's no longer 23. I believe he's 33, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure that's his age. Another aspect of this is that in the last 4 years, he's missed at least, I think, 4 or 5 games a season, and that's just on average. We forget that he did miss a couple games in 2022 that were on minor injuries, but if you look at the entire 2021 season, he was gone after that Giants game. And so again, it's no fault of his own. Injuries can do that to anybody. That can affect anybody anytime, anywhere. Another aspect of that is his personal life, and that's just the fact is that like when men, and this is how we are biologically. When men have kids, they instinctively become a lot more. They try and become a lot more like safe. They try to take care of themselves better so they can be around their kids a lot longer. He has one kid, another on the way. He's engaged to his girlfriend, so obviously his personal life is going to change how he views the rest of his life. Now that doesn't always affect every single athlete. Guys like LeBron and guys like Tom Brady put everything into their body and everything like that to where they're able to overcome that sort of thing. But since Dak Prescott didn't have the success of those guys before he had kids, that's gonna skew how his outlook moving forward. Because again, he's a quarterback with I think 4 years left on his contract, who has dealt with injuries year after year after year throughout this decade, and now he's coming back from another major injury. Which, to be honest, he didn't look great when he was playing this last year when he was healthy, and so. I think if we're talking long term is like 1 to 2 years, I could see that because after that they can get out of his contract. But I don't believe he's going to see the end of this deal as the team's full-time starter.
Dak is 31. I checked while you were talking. He's 31 years old.
Yeah,
his legs are 33 at least.
So that's the unfortunate part too.
Yeah,
were injuries to blame? Injuries to blame for what?
For last season, or was it something else? Do you think?
Injuries definitely didn't help, but he was also healthy the first 8 games. Part of it was they ran a very mundane system that was very predictable. There were teams who, if you listen to like people, these players talk on different podcasts, they said, yeah, we knew where we were going. It's third down and 5, but where's CD Lamb line up? If he's anywhere inside at the Y slot position, we know it's likely going to be a slant or an in and out. Those are his 2 favorite routes to run on those third and 5 or closer type of plays. So they already predict that. And so when you take away that, they didn't have much of a running game. Their offensive line was banged up. We saw some solid play from the backups, but it was still a banged up offensive line. And outside CeeDee Lamb, they didn't have any receiver help. Jake Ferguson was in and out of the lineup with injuries, and he didn't look like himself. And their leading receiver outside of CeeDee Lamb was Jalen Tolbert, who outside of these great touchdown catches is essentially ineffective. He's a guy that if he stops somewhere and is open, he can catch you the ball. But he's shown he's not a guy who can separate consistently down the field or even in the middle of the field and get the ball for you and make a play. So part of it was Dak's injuries. Part of it was the mundane, predictable system. Part of it was the weapons. Really, it's just all of it wasn't good.
All right, I'm flipping the question now because you kind of put the blame on McCarthy with how the offense was and everything. So just hearing you talk about Tolbert like that, what do you think the chances are Mingo takes his spot for wide receiver 3? Because I love the idea of Mingo being in there as a blocker. I don't like Tolbert as a blocker. And at least Mingo has gotten open. He's gotten separation. He just has never gotten a good throw, it seems, in his career. But he's also hasn't done anything. So what do you think his chances are of taking that spot?
Truly, 50-50. And here's why. The Cowboys do not like invest in top draft picks. And the 4th rounder is a top draft pick in players that they don't think can play. They will ride that player till the wheels fall off if possible. They held on to Chaco Charlton way too long because he's a first-round draft pick. I understand Mingo is only a 4th-round draft pick, but they have shown that if they trade for you, they value enough that they're going to give you a shot. They're going to give him every chance to earn that starter position. I don't think that Jalen Tolbert also has like anyone that's left in the offensive room that was there when he was drafted to where he should feel comfortable about his spot anyway. I think right now with CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens as your clear 1-2, teams are you're gonna ask yourself who fits in that 3rd spot. The reason I like Mingo is not only because, as you mentioned, his blocking ability. But with him out there, it allows CeeDee Lamb to play more on the slot instead of having to play at the Z receiver spot. When you play the Z, you have to play more towards the boundary. When you're in the slot, you can play more across the field. You have more field to your left and to your right than you do as a boundary guy. And I think that would help the offense in that way as well. And since he does that better than Tolbert, and Tolbert was a guy you can play in the slot or the outside, that he and CeeDee Lamb would go back and forth. If you keep someone like Mingo on the outside, it allows you to do more with your offense. Not just through the air, but on the ground. So I think they're going to give him a good shot to win it. But right now, just because it's still early and Tolbert does have the connection with Dak still over his first couple of years, I would say about 50-50.
That's a fun question. I also think contract. I think they're going to try to ride Tolbert just because it's his last year. They're like, oh well, whatever. We're just going to keep throwing him out there till things work out. But do you think Brian Schottenheimer is an upgrade over McCarthy, or is it more just like a lateral move?
It's hard to really judge Schotty just because he is his first head coaching gig. If he had any sort of head coaching experience prior, we could judge him more on that. But we only have him as a positional coach or as a coordinator, and he has mixed results in both. He has some good, some bad. What you like about him more is that what he preaches in his press conference is all about culture. It's all about doing the little things. It's all about this other stuff. Whereas McCarthy was very dry with his responses. It doesn't necessarily mean that's how he was as a coach. Some coaches, Bill Belichick, are guys who are dry with the media, dry with their responses, but they coach differently. And that's fine because that's the way that they were taught to coach. Guys like Schottenheimer, who have a long coaching lineage, they're taught to approach the game both on and off the field in different ways. And so it's hard to really give you an answer as if he's an upgrade or a downgrade just because this is his first true chance. Right now, I'm gonna kind of edge my bet and say it's a lateral move just because I expect the team to be better this year, but I don't really know what to base Shoddy on as a head coach yet. What I love about him as a head coach, what he did well, which I can give him credit for, is he went out and he replenished the coaching staff with some really good names. Connor Riley as an offensive line coach is a good get. Clayton Adams, and I talked to my buddies who work for the All City Network in Phoenix. They hated they lost Clayton Adams because they saw him as being that next offensive guru type of head coach because he's so in tune with how to use not only offensive linemen, but to open up the run game. You see guys like that. Eberflus coming back to just coach the defense. I'm okay with that because I don't think he should be calling plays ever again, especially after that Thanksgiving debacle. That was terrible. But as a defensive coach, especially one that likes to use that likes to really emphasize your defensive tackles and your linebackers, I think that's a good get. So if nothing else, Shoddy knows how to build a staff. But for right now, I can't say it's an upgrade or a downgrade from McCarthy.
So I know you just kind of touched on it, but what were your initial thoughts after Schottenheimer got hired, and what are your thoughts on it now?
To be honest, I remember when it was announced he was hired, I went, okay. I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it, but I also didn't love it. I was scared. I'm serious. I was scared that they were going to bring in Kellen Moore because everyone was so enamored with what he did with the Eagles because I don't believe that he really did anything special with the Eagles. I believe they just had a special team. And if you're a Cowboys fan, you see the highs and lows of a Kellen Moore offense. The highs are he can score 30 points a game and Dak Prescott looks fantastic, but God forbid defense is able to adjust to your scheme in the second half, and then you have no answers for it, and you keep running the same plays. It's a very Jason Garrett-esque approach on offense. So that's why I was okay that they didn't give him the job. I was also scared that Bill Belichick, that thing was real. I was scared that they were going to bring him because he's an old soul. He got out the same way Saban got out of college ball. The game passed them by. And I was actually more gunning for guys like Marcus Freeman from Notre Dame as a head coach guy because I think he's got a lot of potential as a coach. I also thought that if they're going to go from an inside guy, sorry, I thought Zim was going to be an option, which I was going to be like he might be like a stopgap coach, not a long-term answer, but I wouldn't have hated that one. But Schottenheimer, I was not as down on as other people were just because I expected worse.
Like that. What are your thoughts on this 2025 team right now?
My thoughts are if they're healthy, they're going to be a damn good team. My thoughts are also that if they don't, if it looks good on paper again, then it's going to be the same old Cowboys season that we've seen before because I've seen this team have really good players and do nothing with it, and it's gotten to the point now where the fandom is so pessimistic that over the last decade and a half, fans have gotten smarter. They've gotten wiser to Jerry's tricks. They've gotten smarter. Sorry. They've gotten smarter to what Jerry says and what he does are usually two different things. They can kind of track what's a lie and what's the truth to where we don't necessarily want a Super Bowl. I mean, we want to win the Super Bowl, but we're settling just to appear in the NFC Championship game. We are the only team in the NFC to not make a conference championship game in the 21st century. Think about that. We're the only franchise in the NFL to not make a conference championship in the 21st century. So all these teams like the Bucks, Washington, the Giants have all been crap, and then they were good and they were crap again before the Cowboys are able to make it back. The last time the Cowboys were in a conference championship, Clinton was president. Okay, so just to give you perspective on the time difference. And then, excuse me. With this Cowboys team, I think they had the talent to get it done. It's just because I don't know enough about how the coach is going to mesh with these players that I'm concerned about. I think it's going to come down to a couple caveats, if I may. It's a tackle play. How do Tyler Guyton and Terrence Steele look? I think Terrence Steele is going to be fine. I'm okay with him being a B-level tackle. Tyler Guyton needs to jump up to at least a B-level tackle because last year he would be on the bench. On the defense, we need to see something from Mozzie or at least from Jay Toya, who I liked a lot from UCLA. We need something from the nose tackle position. We just do. And last but not least, we need one of these unsung cornerbacks, whether it's Kyer Elam or Kalen Carson. We need one of them to step up because I can't trust that Trevon Diggs is going to be healthy. And I'm scared that they're going to move around DaRon Bland too much from nickel and outside to where it's going to affect his game, that we need someone else to step up on the outside.
Agreed. The moving around DaRon Bland terrifies me.
Hey, there's one person in this podcast who has not seen a conference championship, so I just want to see something new, man.
Well, to be fair, I saw it, but I was like very much like I didn't appreciate it at the time. I was like 5 or 6 or however it was when the last time they were in the conference championship. Okay. So I wouldn't know how to appreciate it.
I think my heart wouldn't be able to handle it. I legit think I would have like a heart attack after like every like first down the other team got or whatever. And I'm like, this is just like a dagger every play. But so are you more excited for the offense, defense, or the coaching staff?
I think I say special teams. I am more excited.
It's definitely special teams.
I'll be honest. All that butter. I guess I'm more excited, honestly, for the defense. And it's nothing against the offense. It's just because I have more concerns on the offense than I do the defense, because I really do believe that Dak Prescott's health and the skill play of the offensive tackles are really going to affect how that offense moves. Whereas on defense, if Micah Parsons has a game where he doesn't get a sack, they can still have a good defensive game. They have good pass rushers on the edge. They have a solid, I would say, a pretty solid linebacker core with guys like Kenneth Murray, who I think is a reliable starter. I like the Jack Sanborn signing, who I think he fits well with Eberflus' system, who Eberflus found him as an undrafted free agent out of Wisconsin. And obviously Maris Leafau, who was probably our second best draft pick last year after Cooper Beebe. And then the secondary is right now, it feels like it's up in the air, but you have guys you can rely on. So I feel a little more excited for the defense, just because it feels like they actually paid attention to getting depth on the defense. Whereas the offense, I feel like there's too many caveats and key spots that I think could really make the difference.
If they could get Overshown healthy, man. God.
Yeah, that's the problem, is that he now has that attached to him for the rest of his career if he stays healthy. And anytime you have a player who you have to begin the sentence with if he can stay healthy, then you can't really trust that player. You hope the best, but you can't trust that player.
Agreed.
I was at the game whenever Overshown got hurt.
Well, so it was your fault then, because
I didn't know that. You hurt my. I'm not ranting. Go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
Which position group are you most excited for this year?
Position group. I'll give you one on offense and one on defense. I am excited on the offense. I'm excited for the tight end room. I'm excited to see how Jake Ferguson looks healthy. I'm also excited to see how Brevin Spanford looks year 2. Year 1, he showed you a lot as a blocker, and I think he really has to develop more as a receiver. That's the only area that Schoonmaker, I think, has the edge. I think Schoonmaker is a reliable starter. I think he just is a de facto starter. I'm excited to see the competition between them, as well as John Stevens, if he can stay healthy. There it is. The if he can stay healthy guy, John Stevens.
Yeah.
They also got a couple guys like the kid Neville out of Auburn, I believe it is. So they have options there that I'm actually excited to see how that depth works out. And on defense, because I'm gonna go one of the other. I'm excited to see the competition between the three techniques, because obviously Osa is your first guy. Solomon Thomas, who under Coach Whitecotton found second life as a 3 technique. He realized, hey, you are not an edge player, you're an interior guy, and he's a good player on the inside. So I'm excited to see how that works out. Peyton Turner, who is a guy who played primarily as an edge, I think is going to be a guy you see as a defensive end and a 3 technique interchangeable type player, who was more of a run stuffer anyway, which they need. So I'm excited to see how that looks. So I think more just not just out of need, but like the depth and the competition of those positions has me really intrigued.
What position group concerned you the most? Let's flip it.
I'm not gonna say quarterback, because I feel like that's like, well, for one, because I'm excited for Joe Milton, believe it or not, and I can rely on Greer. I feel like Greer's a dependable backup. So Dak gets hurt, I feel like they have good depth there. Actually, it's offensive tackle. It just is because, like, what happens if Terrence Steele gets hurt again? Your backup right tackle right now is I believe it'd be Nate Thomas, who looked good in OTA, but he's never had any NFL action. But right now he'd be your backup right tackle. Or what if Tyler Guyton sucks? Or what if Tyler Guyton is better off playing right tackle? Or will they give him that option? Because we saw Austin Richards play a couple times last year. And Austin Richards looked pretty awesome. And I thought that I really do think that he's going to give a true competition with Tyler Guyton at the left tackle spot. But it's just because so much is dependent on the tackle spots that, like, I have so much reliance on the interior with Tyler Smith, Cooper Beebe, and Tyler Booker that the tackle spots are so much the opposite direction and how I feel that really does concern me.
So if you could choose one player to have a breakout season, who would it be?
Breakout meaning that they've never had a really good season. They'd be their first.
Yeah, let's go that. That'll be more. That's more fun.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, because there's been guys who had a really good season that kind of dipped, but that would just be like a return or like a reincarnation. Okay, so a breakout season, honestly, Tyler Guyton. let the guy who's covering my quarterback's blind side, who's a first-round draft pick, let him be the guy who turns into an All-Pro. Absolutely. Why wouldn't I choose that guy?
Yeah.
That is the right answer. That is the right answer. Like,
aside from him, sorry, what?
I'd take Mozzie, but Guyton would be my second.
I think the defensive line can overcome Mozzie more than the offensive line can overcome Guyton.
I agree with that.
Who is your make or break player for 2025?
Mozzie Smith. You're a first round nose tackle. You've been a below average starter. And now there were a couple times in the last like 6-7 games at the end of last year where you saw some push from him, you saw some quality play from him, but it wasn't consistent enough. And you need him to be, at this point, you just need him to be a reliable starter. You don't need him to be a stud. You don't need him to be a superstar. You just need him to be a reliable starter because that is the biggest weakness on the defense. Not just the defensive line, but the defense. He's played so bad that fans like me are really pulling for the 6th-round rookie Jay Toya to be a guy that potentially could supplant him because he has really good run stuff and skills. So I believe if Mozzie didn't get done this year, I think he's on his way out.
Agreed. What was your favorite offseason move for Dallas this year?
I mean, everyone loved the George Pickens trade. That was awesome. But are we counting draft too, or just like free agency trades or like any other?
This is on you, my friend.
I actually loved this offseason because like I feel like they didn't just stand pat, which was nice. They didn't go out there and buy a 5-year, $100 million player, which is fine. I don't want you to do that. I want you to find guys who are better suited to at depth. And this year they did that. They addressed needs all around it. I think my favorite move, honestly, is signing Osa Odigizua before free agency. And it's because typically they don't do that. They let these sort of things build up to where the market prices the player out. In this case, they jumped the gun on it. They opened up the cap space for this year, and they signed him before anybody else could get signed, which is such an un-Cowboys move, which to me sort of signaled maybe a change in the philosophy in the Cowboys. So, yeah, the Osa move, I was super excited for that.
Good call.
The front office does something actually competent for once. They pay their guy that they should get the money.
I know I'm being very hesitant about giving them praise because I've been so critical of them over the years, but I have to give credit where credit's due if we're being fair.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, speaking of praise or criticism, what grade do you give them for their offseason?
Well, again, if we're grading on a scale, I would grade it an A because last year's offseason was so putrid. They did next to nothing that I have to give them credit because they went out and they traded. They made 4 trades for players. They added some quality depth. They didn't have to give up much for any of them, really. The draft, I thought, was really, really good. I haven't been this excited for a draft since probably the 2022 draft when they had Tyler Smith and Jake Ferguson and Sam Williams. I loved that draft. I was really confident about that one. I'm really confident about this one as well. And for agency, they didn't go out and spend big money. Their biggest free agent acquisition was a reunion with Dante Fowler, but getting a 10.5 sack player for $8 million is a steal in that regard. So just because this is the Cowboys we're talking about and they have been so cheap the last 15 years, I'm giving it an A.
That's good, man. I like that. I like the optimism there. Fill in the blank here, Shane. My relationship with the Cowboys is blank.
Rocky. I felt like looking at this relationship a long time, y'all were good to me years ago when it first started. You always got me stuff. You got me jewelry. Things were nice. And then we had some rough patches. We got through them together. We had to say bye to Detroit. We had a couple rough years, and then brought in Tony, and things were looking good. And it felt like we're gonna get there again. But it feels like we're trying to recreate a relationship that once was that I don't know if it ever will be again. I feel like we have to I feel like if we want this relationship to continue, we need to change it up and stop trying to relive the relationship we had and try to get to the relationship we're trying to get to.
Last off season was domestic violence. Period. We got beat. All right. Before we get into that and I get us kicked off of the air, Cowboys mantra for 2025. Is it last season was domestic violence? Is that your mantra?
No.
Thank God.
No.
We have a guest. This is supposed to be his show, is his episode, and Mike's still gonna get his kicked off the air. Mike's still gonna get his kicked off the air.
Cowboys mantra, Shane.
A Cowboys mantra. Oh my God. It's okay. It's okay. My Cowboys mantra is be forgetful. And here's what I mean. Here's what I mean by that. We got to stop living in the past. If you're Cowboys fans talking about we have 5 Super Bowls, don't be that fan anymore. You need to forget that. Stop worrying about the injuries if you're a player, if that's going to affect you moving forward. You got to forget that. You got to stop worrying about not making enough plays in a certain playoff game or at the end of the season to make the playoffs. You got to forget that. In order to move forward, you have to move on from your past, so you need to forget that. So that's my mantra for this year.
I like it. Forget about that 30 years. Love it.
Yeah, but you have to explain what it means. Otherwise, people will be like, what the hell are you talking about?
That's all right. A mantra can be explained. That's fair.
All right, Shane, here we are. We have an opportunity. You have 2 to 5 minutes to squash any beef or air any grievances you have with any past or present player, coach, front office member, Cowboys content creator, or fan. Shane, squash your beef, sir.
Well, I'm not going to do it for a fan or a content creator because I usually tell them directly what I think of them. But with a player, life's come at this player fast because he was kicked out of the league and he's habitually getting his ass kicked after getting out of the league, even though he's tried it a second life. Greg Hardy, I didn't like that they added you when they did. I didn't like what you did. I didn't like the audio that came from it. I don't like how you seem so unapologetic about it. And by the way, this factors in for any Cowboys fans any Cowboys player that's along this way, along with who was the offensive lineman they had last year who was in the same situation.
Josh Ball?
Josh Ball, exactly. But yeah, you, Greg Hardy. I thought the Cowboys at that time had too much, I guess you could say, standards to go down that lane. But unfortunately, we're still in the era to which headlines makes headwaves. And so not only do I think what you did was despicable, I think the fact that you weren't apologetic and tried to move on, as you called it, was despicable. I think that you trying to fight people to get your rage out, because that is what it was. You're trying to move on and find a different way, a different outlet for your rage, was despicable. But I enjoy every time I see you lose, because if life doesn't kick you in the ass, the UFC definitely will.
I love
that's
that,
awesome.
Man.
No, that's awesome.
That one, man. Like
Greg Hardy was definitely the Cowboys' lost off season, and we were his girlfriend. That's what I'm hearing from Shane.
I want to mute Mike so you can talk, Shane. Sorry about this guy. Shane, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This was awesome. Great.
I beg
you
apologize for Mike
tonight, man.
I beg you apologize for Mike a lot.
You can use any of this on your radio that you want. Any of my stuff, you're welcome to use it.
You're out of your damn mind if you think I'm putting any of that stuff on the air.
Mike, we're trying to have guests continue to come on the show. This is not how we keep guests coming on.
I think they'll just burn this episode. I'm going to burn this film and I'm going to delete this episode from existence. Shane, but thank you so much for your time, man. I know you talked a little bit about your content prior to the show, but again, remind the people what you got cooking this off season and where we can find your work, sir.
You can hear me directly every Sunday from 10 a.m. to noon on Ticket 760 in San Antonio, Texas. If you missed the show or you want to catch it live but you're not in the area, you can listen to it on the free Iheartmedia app. You can also hear me as a contributor and as the audio disseminator of the Indie Ever Show weekdays from 4 to 7 on the same station. Otherwise, you can see me talking mess on mostly on Twitter. And if you're a Texas Tech fan, I am also the lead host for Believe in Texas Tech. But this is a Cowboys show, so I didn't want to plug a different team for that. But other than that, I appreciate y'all having me on.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Brendan, where can we find you on Twitter, sir?
You can find me at Brendan_Smith26.
Mike, where can everybody block you?
CD Piglet.
Guys, I'm Paul Ryan. You can find me on Twitter at Paul_Ryan15. We appreciate you joining us, and we will see you guys next week.
Yeah, and Mike's account's getting reported.
I'm just saying, last